Happy Monday. Oh, welcome. Perfect timing. Today is Yud Aleph starting Yud Beit Sivan. We're in the final day of Yimei Hashlama. Maybe this will be the final day as we wait for Mashiach, as we continue learning about the revelation of Mashiach. And so we were talking previously about the Rambam believing that Mashiach might come in his time and bringing different signs. Well, we're going to start talking now about our generation. The words of the redemption of the prophet of our generation. Now that we talked about the Rambam in his generation, let's talk about our generation. Clearly, we could see that at the time of the Rambam, unfortunately, Mashiach did not, in fact, come. We could see in the words of the Rebbe two different ideas that come one after another and complete each other. Aleph, biat Mashiach tluya b'maaseh avodat bnei Yisrael b'meshech zman hagalut. The Rebbe will say the coming of Mashiach is dependent on the deeds and the service of the Jewish people at the time of the exile. Ad dorenu, until our generation. Dor Hashvi, which is the seventh generation. And our generation has the mission to complete the work of the previous generation and bring the redemption. And the Rebbe says this service was already complete, and thus the redemption should come immediately. And this, the Rebbe differentiates the announcement of the redemption in our generation from that of the Rambam or many other generations where the sages also thought perhaps Mashiach will come in that generation. Those times were times that would have been meritorious for the redemption if the Jewish people merited it. Those would have been okay.
Since you said that it's a task of our generation to complete this task.
Yeah.
To greet Mashiach. So what is generation? How we define the generation?
We will see.
Okay.
I'm not taking responsibility to define a generation. I will see what the Rebbe and Rabbi Wolf. Okay. I assume that he will get into it.
Okay.
So, Masha'en ken bedorenu, shelo medubar al zman mesugal b'yimizku. So the Rebbe didn't say in our generation. He did not say that it's if we merit. He didn't say if we merit, Mashiach is going to come. Unlike in the previous generation, the Rebbe would say, yes, this was times that if the Jewish people merited, yes, the time of the Rambam could have been the redemption, as well as other times that the sages saw. In fact, the Rebbe says, not just that it's whether we are going to merit, but it's a time where we did our service and it's already proper and we're already meritorious for the coming of Mashiach. Bet, second. The second thing the Rebbe says is not just that all the service already complete and the redemption should come, but more than that, all the idea of the redemptions already began now. The ideas, the concept of the redemption already began. There's already a revelation of Mashiach. And this was in fact, there are many times, this is a side note now, the Rebbe clearly talks about the completion of the service in our generation as well as the beginning, the new things which began kind of a new period already. In the next part of this chapter, we're going to deal with the first point that we brought here. What is this completion of this generation in bringing the redemption? We're going to bring different examples from different sichot of the Rebbe for this concept. In the future chapters, not this one, we're going to deal at length about the second topic. So we're not going to talk much about the second topic other than mentioning that the Rebbe mentioned it. We're going to focus right now on the completion of the service. All right. Gashmut Yudea Geulah v'Geulah Mashiach Dorenu, which is the fulfillment of the ideas of redemption and the revelation of Mashiach in our generation. God willing, this will lead to the complete redemption of Hashem by Hashem, through Hashem's help. If you look at the pshat, the simple explanation, what is the exile? It's a result and a punishment for the sins of the Jewish people, right? The Torah goes at length about this in Parshat Kitavo, right? Where what happens if we don't obey the laws? And similarly, all the prophets that stood up and would warn that the sins of the Jewish people are going to cause this and this and this. In fact, every day we say in our prayer 3 times a day, because of our sin, we were exiled from our land, right? We say this 3 times a day, every single day, except Shabbat. Actually, no, we say Shabbat and Musaf. It's also not true. So thus, it's understood that the coming of Mashiach is connected to the tshuva of the Jewish people. When the Jewish people do tshuva, and they will be forgiven for their sins, and God will return them to the land, right? והשיבות אל לבבך בכל הגויים אשר ידיך השם אלוקיך שמה, ושבת עד השם אלוקיך ושמעת בקולו. This is in the Torah. It doesn't need to be, we don't need to go to Hasidic word. And it was when all these things will come upon you, and you returned your heart from all the goyim that try to, destroy the dichacha. Hashem, God shall place you there. V'shavta ad Hashem, and you return until God your God. V'shamata bekulo, and you heard His voice. And God returned to you and and He had mercy on you, and He returned and gathered you. And He brought you to the land which your ancestors inherited. And He shall again be kind and have goodness upon you the way that He had over your forefathers. And as Rav says in the Gemara, and this is only dependent on what? Tshuva u'ma'asim tovim, repentance and good deeds. Ukipsaka Rambam and the Rama Paskins, Hefticha Torah shesof Yisrael asot tshuva b'sof golutam yaganim. The Torah promises, which is what we read, in the end, the Jewish people are going to do tshuva, and immediately they're going to, in the end of their exile, and immediately they're going to be redeemed. If we go deeper into Kabbalah, it's explained the exile is not just a punishment for the sins. No, it's part of godly plan for fixing the world. If the Jewish people are only in the land of Israel, how can we fix Africa? How can we fix America? How can we fix the rest of the world if we're only in this small area? Right? So, what the Arizal speaks about the world of Tohu, where it talks about the vessels where holy sparks of godly light fell into the depth of klipa, of the concealing shell. Because the Jewish people were exiled among the nations, by this they're spread all over the world. They fulfill Torah and mitzvah everywhere, from China to San Francisco to Australia to Zimbabwe to Chabad of Iceland, right? Like everywhere you look nowadays, there's Jews doing some mitzvah, and there's always been, and this is the part of the exile. So they filter out these, they elevate this, or filter out the bad out of this, and elevate the good out of these godly sparks that fell into these dark places, and return them to be holy, to be used for holiness, to the ownership of holiness, so to speak. And when they finish getting all these sparks, then the Jewish people shall return to their place in Eretz HaKodesh, in the Holy Land. And this is similar to what it says by the sages. The Jewish people were not exiled to the other nations except so that the more converts can join them. So clearly the exile between the nations is part of the godly plan. And there's an inner positive meaning to it. The exile on the one hand is bad, but on the other hand, there's a good purpose for it, which is that there'll be more converts. Every convert actually has a godly spark that is in exile between the nations.
Wait, in exile between the nations. So what does it mean between the nations?
Literally, he lives between the Goyim, between the non-Jews.
Among
the nations. Sorry, among the nations. Yes, sorry. That's the more proper language.
Okay.
This is what happens when you translate.
Okay.
Yeah, among the nations, and when he converts, that spark returns to his natural place within holiness.
Mm-hmm.
And this is about all the ideas of creation. There are concealed godly sparks. And the Jewish people, through their service, return these sparks to holiness. ובאופן פנימי עוד יותר מבואר על יסוד האיגרת הידועה של הבעל שם טוב, בה מספר שעשה עלייה נשמה להיכל משיח ושאל אותו, מתי קראתי מר? והשיב לו, לכשיפותו מעיינותיך, מעיינות תורת החסידות חוצה. In a more inner way, based on the Hasidic purpose, there's a famous known scroll of the Baal Shem Tov where he tells that he went up, his soul went up to the Heichal Mashiach, to the place of Mashiach, and he asked him, where is the master going to come? And Mashiach answered, when your wellsprings, the Torah Chassid are going to spread outwards. שמזה מובן שביות משיח תלויה בהפצת מעיינות הבעל שם טוב, תורת החסידות בכל מקום. So, more so, you could say that the coming of Mashiach is dependent on spreading the wellspring of Chassidus everywhere, and especially the wellspring of the Baal Shem Tov specifically. And his Torah, which is the Torah of Chassidus, out. מובהר על כך עוד, שזה הפירוש הפנימי בין הדבר תלוי בתשובה. This is the inner meaning of all it depends upon is repentance, tshuva. שאין הכוונה לתשובה פשוטה הגדרת כדי לכפר על חטאים. This is not the simple tshuva, which is repentance, which is I said, אלא גם בעיקר להשבת הנפש למקום ששם. No, this tshuva is return. And most importantly, the return of the soul to its source and its holiness, its roots. שזהו על ידי לימוד תורת חסידות. How does your soul return to its roots? How does it return in a way towards holiness? By learning Chassidut, by learning the inner parts of the Torah. And this is the true meaning when we're talking about the elevating of the sparks. The real strength of elevating and separating the good sparks from the dirt, so to speak, is in the power of learning the Torah of Chassidut. And thus, the service of the Jewish people for all these generations has been to do tshuva, limud Torah, learn Torah, v'kiyum mitzvot, and generally to do mitzvot, right? ולימוד ועבודת תורת החסידות במיוחד, שעל ידי זה במשיח פועל, and specifically learning and spreading the Torah of Chassidut, which through this, Mashiach is going to come in actuality. והרבי רייץ, the Frierdiker Rebbe, במשך שנות נשיאותו דיבר כמה פעמים על כך שעבודת דורות תלך מסתיימת. Spoke several times that the work of the generation goes and is getting complete. וכעת תוחסים כבר בצחצוח כפתורים, and he famously described it, that now all we have left is to shine the buttons. לקראת בו משיח, for the coming of Mashiach. בדוגמת חיילים מצחצחים כפתוריהם לקראת המסדר, בו יקבלו את פני המלך. Like the soldiers who are shining their buttons, so the buttons are shiny when they welcome the king, when they see the king.
This is the last step of preparation.
Right, the last step of preparation is where everything's already done, now you're just shining the buttons so you look extra nice. ובשנות המלחמה העולמית, and in the time of the World War, יצא בסדרה של 4 קול קורא בסיסמה לאלתר לתשובה, לאלתר לגאולה. And he actually had a slogan, we should go for tshuva, we should go for Geulah. Alter, I believe, yeah, should go. שתוכנם הוא שובה ישראל עד השם אלוקיך, ואכן עצמך ובני ביתך לקבל פני משיח תתקנו במקום ממש. The message of that is generally, return Israel to God your God, and prepare yourself in your household to receive the face of Mashiach Tzidkenu, who's going to come very, very soon. ושנה לאחר הסתלקותו, באור לי"א שבט תשי"א, עלה הרבי נשיא דורנו לכיסא נשיאות חב"ד. A year after the Frierdiker Rebbe Silula, it's interesting that he uses the word istalkut usually, but Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud, the Rebbe went to the chair of the leadership of Chabad. ובאמרו הראשון, the Rebbe famously started with Bati Legani. הקביל בדורנו זה הדור השביעי לחסידות חב"ד. מאז יסודר על ידי האדמו"ר הזקן, he mentioned, and he immediately parallels the 7th generation that is mentioned in Bati Legani to this generation, which is the 7th generation, right? Which is the לדורו של משה רבנו, השביעי לאברהם. Right, the 7th generation of Chabad rabbis since the founding by the Alter Rebbe, which is like the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the 7th one after Avram. הוא ביאר, כשם שעל ידי משה הייתה השראת התחינה למטה בארץ וגם המשפט. He explains, just like through Moshe Rabbeinu, the Shechina finally ended going all the way down to earth with the setting up of the Mishkan. כך גם דורנו, הדור שהמשיך את השכינה למטה. Our generation is a generation who's going to continue the Shechina below, בארץ בקביעות, to the land eternal, in an eternal, permanent way, ולנצח, forever, sorry. בבית המקדש השלישי בגאולה מלפני, in the 3rd temple with the final and complete redemption. וזאת על ידי אבותינו בהפצת התורה והיהדות בכלל, והפצת היהדות בכלל. And how are we going to get this? By spreading the Torah and Judaism in general, and the spreading of Hasidut specifically, right? So by doing that, that's what we're going to merit. ובמשך השנים, בפרט לקראת סוף שנות המ"מים, הרבי התבטא בהזדמנויות רבות וסוגות שונים, שעבודה בני ישראל אהבה את הגאולה בכל המובנים של הסתמה ושלמה. And as the years went past, and especially as we hit Tafshin Mem, which is the 80s, I believe, the Rebbe many times mentioned that the service of the Jewish people to bring the redemption in all of its methods has been fulfilled and complete. We're going to bring some words of the Rebbe to examples directly from the Rebbe about this. Well, quotes or part, it's different sections, I would say, sections from different Rebbe Sichos. So the Kvar Asu Tshuva, they already repented. התורה אמרה כנ"ל שביאת המשיח תלויה בתשובת בני ישראל, בדורנו זה ישנה תנועה משמעותית של רבות יהודים שרוקים בדרך תורה ומצוות, כאלה משלמים עליה. The Torah said that the time Mashiach, the Mashiach, the coming of Mashiach is dependent on the repentance of the Jewish people, the tshuva of the Jewish people. In this generation, there's a great grand movements of tens of thousands of Jews who are very far away from the words of Torah, and now they're returning to it. Around me sit 3 people who did not grow up very observant in any way, shape, or form, right? And now we're learning Torah, we're learning Chassidus. We're including one more on Zoom that I would imagine did not grow up in the Soviet Union as a very observant Jew. So certainly the amount of people who've
So
retired.
we're coming back to the same thing as before. What is our generation? We're going
Get there.
around.
Let's see if
Oh,
the Rebbe. I
because
would like to.
look,
I don't
Alon,
want to
I
answer from
understand.
my words. I would like to see what the Rebbe says and or what Rabbi Wolf, who is more of an expert matter than me.
Because on one of the things it was said about 70 years versus the 70 years basically is 4 generations, not 1 generation. So something is, well, wait.
So again, why don't I don't want to answer this question because this question is complicated and in many it's complicated is my answer to you. I don't have I out of the top of my head cannot tell you an exact answer. Thus I won't. And I'm hoping that by through this learning I will have an exact answer for after we finish the learning, right? I don't know. I've heard different variations, but because these things I heard were from people who I wouldn't necessarily consider experts on the matter, I don't want to bring them as proof positive, right? I do feel that the Rebbe is definitely an expert in the matter, and I'm willing to extend to Rabbi Wolf that he is also an expert in the matter. Certainly, maybe not at the level of the Rebbe, but as far as anyone who's not the Rebbe himself can be on this matter. So I cannot imagine that at no point during this book will he cover what is a generation. I feel like it's a very fundamental question, but right now we're not focusing. That'll probably be in the future chapters. I will tell you that as the second answer. I expect it will not be in this chapter, as he mentioned right away. We're not focusing on the second part. We're focusing on how the different proofs that it seems like we've already completed the work. That is what the focus of this chapter is. The next several chapters will be the second part. So I don't expect to answer this question this week.
So Alon, sorry about interrupting, but basically they would said at the very beginning that if Moshe Rabbeinu was allowed to land of Israel, that's when the work was being done.
Yes.
Now he wasn't allowed, so work wasn't done, so on and so forth. So that's clearly it became kind of a. It was done. Could have been done 3,000 years ago, 2,000, whatever.
Certainly, no. And again, we do not deny that we went over 2 weeks ago about the Rambam's proofs for why he believes that his generation was the right one, and I can't say that what the Rambam said. It seemed very logical, and it wasn't. The Rambam was not just saying things; he was following signs given and seeing that it's possible. And the Rebbe agrees. The Rambam was a plausible generation. However, the Jews were not meritorious. Our generation, the Rebbe said, we're already complete. We're going to go see how we're complete. Let's focus on that. I don't want to get distracted on answering a question that I know will not be answered yet. We will get to it, I believe, in the future chapters. Based on Rabbi Wolf intentionally taking the time to say, this will be in future chapters. Right now, we're focusing on just how can we say that we've completed the work, right? We're not focusing on what a generation is yet. That will come. We want to talk about how we can, if we can agree that it seems like the work has been completed, then we can go and say, okay, what's going on, right? So he's building the case, right? He's building the case that the work is complete. Now, once we agree with that, then we can go and try to discuss what is a generation, what does it mean the Mashiach is here, all those other concepts that are definitely important. And there's this much book left, right? This is a lot of book. I am fairly certain that he will discuss that. All right. So as we said, in Tafshin and Aleph, the Rebbe said, in his words directly, in this generation, the babies who were captured, so to speak, has had the greatest awakening. To return to the path of Torah and mitzvot. Until we can see tens of thousands of Jews who came close and became people who completely Torah observant and do mitzvot in actuality. And he says, and this is increasing for more and more strength and more power. בהמשך אותה שיחה מוסיף הרב ואומר יותר מזו, in the same שיחה he continues and adds, אין לך אדם מישראל שלא יראה תשובה. There's no Jewish person who didn't think of doing tshuva at least one time. לא רק בפעם אחת, כמה פעמים שחייב. And most think about it doing multiple times throughout their lives. שעל ידי זה נעשה בשעת אחת וברגע אחד מרשע גמור צדיק. When you are contemplating doing tshuva, even for a moment, at that moment you go from being a Rasha Gomer to a Tzaddik Gomer. Because you're contemplating returning to God, doing tshuva. כפסק דין הגמרא שהמקדש את האישה על מנת שאני צדיק גמור, אפילו רשע גמור מקודש, שמעיר תשובה. If someone, the Gemara Paskin, if you say, I sanctify this wife so that I am so that I can be a perfect tzaddik, even if he's a completely wicked person, perhaps it's kosher because perhaps he thought of repenting at that moment.
The condition.
Yeah. It's a valid condition, it's a valid kiddushin. And certainly the Rebbe says Mashiach Tzidkenu should come immediately. מכלל דבריו אפשר להבין כאשר אמרה התורה אפשרת על השם לקחת from his words you can understand when the Torah said and you returned until God your God. על דרך זה לשון חז"ל אין הדבר תלוי בתשובה, and as the sages say it's only dependent on returning to God. אין ישראל נגאלים אלא בתשובה, and the Jewish people are not redeemed except through tshuva. The עוד לשונות כותבת there are many other different ways to say the same concept. אין כוונה שכל ישראל כולם יחשו תשומת שלמה ורק אז יגדל אותם הקדוש ברוך הוא. This doesn't mean that every single Jew will need to do complete repentance, be Orthodox Jews, observing every mitzvah, and only then will God redeem them. ולכאורה ככה לומר כן. However, perhaps it is the case. שהרי מצינו כמה וכמה נבואות, we saw so many prophecies. שרק לאחר הגאולה וקיבוץ ישראל, אל ארצם, אז ישראל התחרטו על עוונותם והתביישו בהם ושובו בהם. The opposite. Sorry. In fact, we found the opposite. In many prophecies, it says only after the Jews are gathered into the land of Israel, then they're going to regret their sins and are going to be feeling shame in them and they're going to return from them. ואז ייתן להם השם לב חדש ורוח חדשה, and Hashem will give them a new heart, so to speak, and a new spirit to serve them. ולפיכך התשובה המדברת הקודמת לגאולה תתפרש כתנועה של תשובה. So, if that is the case, then when we're talking about the tshuva that is before the redemption, it is a movement, a tshuva movement, so to speak. A movement of tshuva that a large part of the Jewish people will move towards doing tshuva, even before, which we're seeing today. Or at least a large part of the Jewish people will think about repenting. Even if they're not able to do it, even if they don't do it, they'll at least consider it. And the Rebbe says, through this will come the redemption and the gathering of the Jewish people to their land. And then the tshuva will be in actuality of all the Jewish people. And these words can also be combined with his words in a different place in Dvar Malchut Tafshin Bet on Parshat Noach. Similar idea, but a little different. גם כשידע איניש בנפשי בעמדו ומצבו שיש אצלו עניינים מצריכים תיקון, אין זה בסתירה חס ושלום לעדותו של נשיא דורנו, שכבר נשלמה עבודה ועומדים מוכנים לקבל בני משיח צדקנו. Even when a person knows that in his own part, he still has things that he needs to correct. If I know I'm not a perfect tzaddik, I did not do the perfect tshuva that I would like to do, that doesn't, God forbid, contradict the Frierdiker Rebbe's words that we already completed all the service and are about to receive the face of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Because the actual service of the general Jewish people, of all the Jewish people together, throughout the generation that needed to be in the time of exile, is already completed. And the Rebbe says there's no explanation or reason at all for the delay of the redemption. ולכן גם חסר בעודו של הפרט במשך הזמן שמתעכבת הגאולה מאיזו סיבה שתהיה, הרי זה עניין פרטי שבוודאי צריך לתקנו שמו. Certainly, if there's something lacking, a detail that's lacking in this time, that the redemption is being delayed, you should fix it. Never doesn't say ignore the fact that there's something you should correct and do better. But this is a personal thing that you should fix and complete. But this doesn't touch the fact that you have to correct yourself and do this particular mitzvah or improve your own observance. That's true. This doesn't remove from the fact that the service that we need to do, the general, generic, all Jewish people together, they're already done, that are ready to receive the redemption. The Jewish people are on the level of one height, whole height, and they're in a level that they're ready with all their limbs, they're complete with all 248 limbs and 366 veins. 65, I think 365, yes, sorry. והחיסרון דהפרט הוא כמו מיחוש או חולי קל וחיצוני באיבר פרטי שנבנו על ידי רפואה כאמירה. And the fact that we're lacking something, it's like having a cold, a light cold, which is just like a outside external light sickness in a particular thing, or a scratch. It's not even a cold. I think the Rebbe is describing like having a little scratch in your hand that can be easily corrected through very easy medication, or very easy medicine. It doesn't require, it's not a, all right. הסתיימה עבודת הבירורים. Yeah. We'll finish this part and then we'll continue next week. So we completed the service of the elevation. כנ"ל על פי קבלת האריזה, על פיזור בני ישראל בגלות על פי תוכנית אלוקית. As we said before, the Arizal says that the fact that Jewish people have been spread in exile is a godly plan. שהטילה על נשמות ישראל, זה משימה לקרקד נצולות כשהפרים בעולם ולברר אותם מתוך הקליפות באמצעים. Because he says that the job of the Jewish people is to gather all the sparks of holiness that are all over the world and to elevate them from the shell of unholiness that they're found in. ובשיחות של חודש כיסלו תש"ב חזר רבי כמה פעמים על כך שעבודת הבירורים מסתרה הנשמה. And in the Sichot of Kislev Tavshin, the Rebbe multiple times repeated that the service of elevating these sparks is complete. And the redemption should come immediately. And in the end of that month, Shabbat Parashat Yeshev, the Rebbe had a whole sikha about this particular concept. We're going to bring the most important parts of his words to do with this topic. דובר פעמים רבות לאחרונה בפרט בזמן האחרון, כי על פי כל הסימנים דורנו הדור האחרון של הגלות. It was spoken about many times, and especially the last times, that based on every sign, our generation is the final generation of the redemption. Of the exile. And already the first generation of the redemption. Because we have completed all the ideas of our service and we're standing ready to receive the true redemption with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu immediately. Yes, there are those who ask, the redemption is dependent that the whole world should be prepared. Not just one person or some people. Not just one part of the world. The whole world. Because the redemption will gather the Jewish people from all corners of the land. And when we see the elevation of the other nations, so to speak, in all the lands, where do we see, you could ask, a change in the world? How is the world today more prepared and ready for the redemption of the previous generation? And we can understand this, the reason why the Jewish people went from one place to another in their exile. The Rebbe says, and they were Chassidus about the sages, God did not exile the Jewish people to be among the nation, except so that they can have more converts. What is these converts? Converts hints to all of the holy sparks that are found in all the ideas of the world. And the fact that God exiled Jewish people on many different places in the world, it's to elevate, filter, and elevate the holy sparks that are in that place. This is why he actually did justice or charity to the Jewish people when he spread them out amongst the nations. Because he let us have the merit of elevating every single place. By this, we can understand this generation even compared to the generation before. In this generation, the Jews are further spread out than they've ever been. אלא אפילו בדורות הראשונים של הגלות, התגוררו יהודים רק בצורות מסוימות. Not just that most of the Jewish people for most generations were around Eretz Israel, or in its area, but even in the first generation of exile, the Jews only lived in certain countries. ועל כל פנים רק בחצי כדור הארץ, certainly only in the higher part of the earth, right? If you look at the earth starting from Israel as the top point, then the Jews only lived around Israel, and they didn't live in the Americas. מה שאין כן בדורות שאחרי זה. רבות יותר עד גם בחצי הכדור התחתון. באמריקה כולי. Until today, even in America, etc. ובכל דור ודור נוסף זה עוד יותר, עד דורנו הנ"ל. אשר בו יהודים מצויים בכל כזאת ולמה שהם מקיימים שם תורה מצוות. Until in our generation, not just that we're spread so much, that we're in every corner of the universe and we're fulfilled there Torah and mitzvot. כשבונים בזאת, אפילו לרגע קל רואים את האלוהים שבדורנו אף לגבי הדורות שלפנינו. So we see, if you look at this, how much greater our generation is, even compared to the generation before. בזה שישנו בירור וזכוך של כל מידה לעולם. There is an elevation and filtration and elevation of every single country in the world. ועל פי מדובר לעיל וכמה פעמים שלפני כל הסימנים כבר סיימו את כל הבירורים ומודע מדוח זה בשלב הגאולה. Based on all the signs, they already completed everything that needed to be elevated. So we understand why we already are holding on to the stage of redemption. ודברים אלו מתחברים לדבריו בשיחה לפני כן בשבת פרשת ויצא, כשמדובר כמה פעמים לאחרונה שאחרי הריבוע המפלג של מעשה ונותן בעצם כל הדורות, כבר סיימו את כל הדברים. And again, the Rebbe also said similarly in the Psicha before, in Parshat Vayetze, that with all our deeds that we have done in the generation, they already completed all the birurim. כפי שרואים זאת גם בהנהגה שבזמן זה ולעולם בדרך מלכות של חסד. As we see, in this time, even the nations of the world behave with more kindness, chesed. כמו כן, מתפשט ההנהגה הזאת במדינות כפי שרואים בפרט לאחרונה. There are more and more countries who are acting through kindness, right? Instead of שלא זה בלבד שבני ישראל נמצאים בכל מקום בעולם חינוך ותוכנית צדק, שאפשר לראות קצת בחלק מעולמות העולם, זכר אותם. Not just that our work elevated the nations, but we can see that the nations are no longer quiet as bloodthirsty. They care about people's lives. They care about things that this is part of the Jewish people elevating the nation. Our influence elevated. This is why we understand why we already are holding at the stage of redemption. So we will complete this chapter, God willing, next
collective level.
Collective level. B'shlav Geulah. It doesn't say, it just says the stage of redemption. The Rebbe doesn't use the word collective. Ochzim kvar b'shlav Geulah. The stage of redemption. I'm not adding words that the Rebbe didn't put in that sikha. Yeah, this is we're gonna, God willing, next.
It's getting more interesting because it's more
As
relevant to
far
our
as generation, and this is not me in any way trying to say this, but like in my head, when I think about it, we're stuck to thinking generation is like a lifetime of one particular person, and then his next generation, like children generation. But I think for Jews, it's not like that. There's generation of things we as people go through. You know, there was like a generation of slavery in Egypt, right? There was multiple generations, but the reality we experienced it together, regardless how many of them, right?
No, but we
Yeah,
know the
there was a
but to be fair, there is multiple generations in Egypt, right? We know
Right,
that
right. That's
well.
what I'm saying. But right, multiple generations was almost 400, 420 years,
210.
210, and they were supposed to spend
400 was if you count for the time from the first time that Avram.
right, yeah. So no, I'm saying it's not that multiple generations. I'm saying that it's like you know they call it generational trauma, like for the whole thing, and then there's the next like etap, like next
Yeah.
step, right? Like